Welcome to the second invited panel of the 21st Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. NWIL's land acknowledgement is read at our opening and closing sessions. To view NWIL's land acknowledgement statement, please visit our website, nwil.org, under the Land Acknowledgement tab, and I believe that link will be in the Whova chat shortly. Today's date is Friday, September 16th, 2022. This panel is titled Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Information Services. It will be presented by Marita Kipp, Ann Carr-Wiggins, Beth Greenhorn, Delia Chartrand, and Tom Thompson, and Carl Seward. The panel was coordinated by Manisha Katarpal. My name is Rebecca Mintz, and I'm the convener for this session. This panel is being recorded with permission from the presenters. Because they retain the copyright to the information they are presenting, they may choose to request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request to the NWIL committee chairperson. However, at this time, it is planned that recordings will be made available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. During the session, to turn live captioning on, click the CC link at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitle. If you have questions during the session, please use the Q&A function in Whova, and I will pose these questions to the presenters at the end of the panel. When the panel ends, please complete the post-session survey in Whova, located on the conference homepage, and we'll provide a link in chat as well. NWIL and presenters appreciate and we use your feedback. On that note, I will turn over the session to our first panelist, Marita Kipp.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Marita Kipp. I'm the library administrator here at the YAKAMA Nation Library. We're located in Toppenish, Washington. We're on a campus that includes a gift shop, museum, and a meeting conference room in the center of it. Currently, we have some buildings that have closed, still trying to come out of the pandemic, such as our theater. So on this slide is a picture of our library. You can see off to the right is our children's section, and the door leads into our computer lab, and then some of our seating area. So we are a public tribal library. So you don't have to be a tribal member to come to our library. That's a common question that we get. So we are open to the public. Let me go to my next slide. This is kind of give you a better idea where the Yakama Reservation is located in Washington State. We're kind of centrally located between Portland, Seattle, and Spokane. And in the yellow is the ceded area. So that's where Yakama Nation retains their right for fishing and hunting in those areas. And then we're located there in Toppenish, Washington. This is our staff. So I'm the library administrator. We have Jolena, she's the library technician. We have Tanisha, she's the administrative assistant. Kathy Miller, she's the library technician. And Melanie Belli, she's our computer specialist. And Michael Seka-Kwapteva is the multimedia specialist. So for our library, our main focus areas are reading literacy, digital literacy, cultural preservation, and community outreach. So the picture shows a visiting group doing some storytelling. So that little area, that's kind of our center part of our library. It's a little, we call it the pit. So it's just a little few steps down, and a lot of people, they like to hang out in there, even when there's nothing scheduled. So kind of makes our library unique. So for reading literacy, some of the things we do is storytelling. So we go to our tribal Head Start centers, our casino daycare center to do storytelling. We offer free first book ebooks download. I don't know if anyone's uses First Book, so that's why I put the little logo in the bottom right of the slide. But you can create an account to get some codes to distribute to your community. We do Dr. Seuss Day on Dr. Seuss's birthday. We implement the 1,000 books before kindergarten. And then also, in addition to the ebooks, we purchase books from First Book at a discount. And we hand them out when we do all of our storytelling sessions weekly at the Head Start centers and the Little Legends to build at-home libraries. And we have a large updated collection. So digital literacy, we have 40 plus computers with internet access. We offer free Wi-Fi. We got funded through the Emergency Connectivity Fund so that funds are, we have 100 hotspots for checkout. And then the Emergency Connectivity Fund is also funding at-home connections. So meaning that there's 350 homes that we're going to supply internet at-home connections with the Yakama Nation service provider. And that covers the cost of their installation, the equipment, and 8 months of monthly service. So we just started taking applications for that. In the staff, you see where I had the multimedia specialist and the computer specialist listed. So they provide individual computer technical support. And then they also teach the computer classes, which include the Microsoft Imagine Academy. So that includes the Office suite, like Excel, PowerPoint, Word, computer basics. We have a bunch of classes there. And then we also offer the certification. And then to support the certification, the G-Metrics practice exams. And we get access through that through the Washington State Library. So for cultural preservation, we are, because like I said, we have a museum and a gift shop. So we're kind of like a touristy attraction when people come to the Yakama Reservation. So tourists, classrooms, they can request cultural presentations from library staff. So they tell Yakama legends, storytelling to surrounding schools, visiting schools, and some of them, they're not schools, they're just maybe organizations that decide to come visit the Yakama Nation. So we rotate between the museum and the library, and then they tour the gift shop. We're a part of the Washington State University Plateau Peoples web portal, and that is a part of their land acknowledgement to help neighboring tribes digitize and preserve their valuable items that are deteriorating. We have a Yakama Nation flag video that tourists like to watch. It just helps show how the Yakama Nation flag was created. Then we have a large collection about Yakama Nation and then also other tribes. And this was just a picture of how we've been kind of slowly making improvements to our library. So we have like our old shelving, and then as we expanded our collection, we moved to metal shelving and updated our collection. Some of our grant projects we have through the IMLS. Currently, we're doing a digitization project. Expanded our Wi-Fi, did internet upgrades. We got the ALA NEH to have our multimedia workshop, and then various grants from Washington State Library that supports digital literacy and STEM. Some partnerships we have are with Washington State Library, Washington State University, Central Washington University, the University of Washington iSchool, an association of tribal archives and libraries and museums. And they're going to have their conference ATOM. That's everyone calls it ATOM, and that'll be next month in Temecula, California. So if you've never been, want to get more familiar with tribal libraries, archives, museums, that's a good conference to go to. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know why it felt so long, but I look forward to your questions if you have any at the end. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll stop sharing now.
Okay. And our next presenter will be Ann Carr-Wiggins.
All right. Okay. All right. Is that working for everyone, hopefully? So yes, I'm Ann Carr-Wiggins. I'm of Scottish and English heritage, and I came to these lands as an adult. I work at the University of Alberta Library, and I coordinate some of our Indigenous initiatives, including the First Nations Information Connection and our Indigenous internship for Indigenous MLIS students and a few other things. I just want to acknowledge Manisha, who I normally would present with one of the First Nations Information College libraries, and Manisha is she's here. So if she needs to pop in, or if you need to ask her questions, then she's here. But she's dealing with some things in the community today. So I'm going to run through our slides for us. Okay, so. I'd like to begin by honoring the people who have enabled the journey so far, the library staff of the First Nations colleges and the staff of the University of Alberta Library. And we'd like to acknowledge the land. I'm speaking to you today from Indigenous lands from Amiskwichiwaskayigan, also known as Edmonton, in Treaty 6 and Métis territory. It's land of the Nehewak, Nitsitapin, Nakota Sioux, Dene, and Métis peoples. And just for people who are not from these parts, there are three main groups of Indigenous peoples in Canada, this part of Turtle Island. First Nations people are the people who were here when the Europeans first arrived. Métis grew up during the fur trade, intermarriage of Indigenous people and people coming in from generally Scotland and France. And they trace their origins to the Red River area in Manitoba. And then Inuit are people who live in the north, in Northwest Territories and Nunavut. And as you can, just a little bit of background about these lands around here there. So today I'm going to talk about the First Nations Information Connection, which is a collaboration between 5 First Nations libraries in Alberta and the University of Alberta. All of the university and college libraries are in Indigenous communities, except for Yellowhead Tribal College, which is in Amiskwichiwaskayigan and serves the urban Indigenous population and also several reserves to the west and north of the city. So U of A is a large colonial institution, no question about that. And though our library has been on the journey towards decolonization for years, it's not there yet. And the steps are sometimes hard won. The Finnick libraries, though, are an Indigenous institutions and have an Indigenous service model. And we just put some words from Sharon, who's the librarian at Blue Quills University, about their service model. And I will say, you know, we try at the U of A to have relationships with our students, and we do. But definitely at an Indigenous institution, that kind of family atmosphere and that family model, as Marida was saying, is definitely easier to reach for sure. So FNIC began with some provincial government funding in 2006 for post-secondary libraries for licensing and some other initiatives. It was mostly licensing of electronic resources that the funding was for, though. And to participate, libraries had to have a web presence, and they had to be able to invite the community into the libraries to use the resources. And at the U of A, we wanted to make sure that the First Nations libraries could be included in this funding. And just to say, First Nations colleges have extreme funding challenges. They rely on one-time project funding and an unstable array of government sources. And when we started working with them, the libraries definitely varied a lot in their technical and physical realities. So we got some funding to sort of to start it off and to kind of fund the first stages of the infrastructure and some computers and all that kind of thing, and also to fund visiting the colleges to kind of talk to them about everything. And it also kind of brought them together for some conferences as well along the way. And then University of Alberta has funded it since then, but we haven't. I mean, to be honest, we haven't had that level of funding since we managed to secure it at the very beginning, but we have funded the FNIC. So we started by getting to know the libraries and their staff. You see Mary Weaselfat here and our previous chief librarian, Ernie Ingalls. So we kind of traveled around and asked them what they wanted and how they wanted to work together and all of those things. And really, relationships are at the heart of our work. Many years ago, I went to a conference session that was called "The First Year I Spent Drinking Tea." And that is actually very apt when working with Indigenous communities. But luckily, it fits in with our style of work as well. And we've definitely drunk a lot of tea along the way and some glasses of wine as well, really. So we take what we call a visiting approach. The Nehewewin word is Kiokewin, which means visiting, and that is kind of the way we like to work. So the first interface and shared catalog was Circe Dynix Symphony with Rooms. And we launched that with a celebration at Blackfoot Crossing. As you can see here, we had a lot of fun. We had dancers, and these are some of the senior level administrators from the institutions. And out through the window, you can see the coulees of the southern prairies. And so, but now the FNIC has continued over the years, and we've kind of worked together. This year, we migrated to a new integrated library system, KOHA, a new shared catalog. And in terms of sharing collections, the libraries do a little bit. They're a bit limited by financial constraints and geographic constraints as well, because of course the colleges are quite distant from each other around Alberta. Like Red Crow and Old Sun in the south are like 7 and 6 hours drive from where we are. Manisha is closer in Maskwacis, but and Yellowhead is obviously here, and Blue Quills is about 2-3 hours drive. So you know they're pretty geographically spread over the land. They do get free access to interlibrary loan from the University of Alberta, and we've got in the NEOS Library Consortium, we've got like 30 million items, so that's kind of easy access for them. And they've got to know each other along the way, and they share expertise. During the pandemic, we kept up with Zoom visits, and this summer I actually had my first post-COVID visit to Red Crow, which was really wonderful. And one of the best things that has grown out of this relationship is the participation of 2 FNIC librarians, Mary Weaselfat from Red Crow and Nicole Palanock from Yellowhead Tribal College, in our decolonizing description work in this group we have. And this is to get rid of headings like Indians of North America and all of those things, and establish more accurate and respectful headings based on consultation with the communities. And you'll see here just a couple of the results of some consultation we did on, you know, what do we say instead of Indians of North America? What do we say instead of the Riel Rebellion, which was a Métis event. And so that's been very, very useful. They've been able to enrich the conversation with what they know, and they've been able to consult with elders and their community in the North and South. And just to end, Justice Maurice Sinclair served as the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which in Canada has inspired and guided the difficult work of decolonization. And just to finish to say, relationships are at the heart of our work, and definitely are what make our initiatives kind of, I mean, hopefully they're successful. That seems a bit of an assumption on my part, but I think yeah, they've definitely worked over the years. So that's it from me. So yes, look forward to questions at the end.
Thank you. That was great. And then our next presenters will be Beth Greenhorn, Delia Chartrand, and Tom Thompson. And I believe you'll be able to screen share, and Tom, remember to include sound. Thank you. And Beth, you're still muted.
You're muted.
I thought I had just taken myself off mute. Okay, well, I'll say that again. Thanks so much, Rebecca, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm happy to be speaking today about Nations to Nations, Indigenous Voices at Library and Archives Canada. And before I begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm a settler living on the unceded and traditional territory of the Kittakinzibi Anishinaabe and the Algonquins of the Pigwagonagan First Nation. I acknowledge that they are the first and rightful inhabitants of the lands and waters now called Southeastern Ontario and Southwestern Quebec. In my role as coordinator, I work closely with each of the authors and manage the Indigenous language translations. I'm joined today by my colleagues Tom Thompson, who designed the book, and Delia Chartrand, who is author of 2 of the essays. And just to situate us, Tom and I are both in Ottawa, Ontario, and Delia is coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba. So while I speak about some of the features of the ebook, Tom is going to take over the screen, and he's going to take you on a tour during both my presentation and Delia, who will follow with who will speak to the considerations of a loan program. So I'll let Tom load that up. Or while he's doing that, I can still continue since time is quite tight. So Nations to Nations is an interactive and multimedia ebook. It's the first of its kind for a federal government department in Canada. The book was in development from spring of 2019, and we launched it last September in 2021. We also launched it just a few months before UNESCO declared 2022 as the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. All of the material was selected and interpreted by First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation staff at Library and Archives Canada. Here's this is a map that we created as a way to access the essays and authors' bios instead of just going to the traditional index. It includes over 140 items, and these range from journals, maps, artwork, photographs, audio recordings, moving images, and published records. Where possible, the essays were translated into the language and dialects of the people or communities represented in each section. And as you can see in this one, in essays such as this text about wigwas, which is about birch bark, is that the text is available through popovers for English and French. So, but we really wanted to position the Indigenous languages first and put that, as the front and center in the book where we could. This edition of the ebook contains 28 essays. 7 are translated into First Nations language and dialects. 4 are in Inuktitut, and this is the language of Inuit. And these include texts in both Roman orthography and syllabics writing systems. And here's an example of one of the Inuit essays. And then in addition to that, there are 18 audio recordings in Heritage Michif, which is the language of the Métis Nation. And these describe select images that are featured in the Métis Nation essays. And I'll just let Tom play you a short clip by Elder Verna de Montenay, who did all of the Michif recordings.
Utadal potre ne wap mau nom epimuhtet ara and coral ver. Sasameta kunam and har. Alatur sumuju kishkawew esetu fleshy. Dale coral kwap mau nom de dan eposhet. Petroli chien wikubut dewak and heli coral. Anavali chien kwap mau nom promination avec les rachètes d'ACP petah kuname vendu sa son épaule. En avant pemuteo. Kayash mana li shengi apchananik nanokawit deyak la grab kanatama please affair mina kanatamak.
Thanks, Tom. And I'll just mention, I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at the PowerPoint slides that Rebecca uploaded for us, but most of the content, with the exception of links back to our collection items and external links, as well as our blog posts, are embedded in the book. And each image, like you can see on the screen right here, are very, very high res. And if you have a device, ideally an iPad or a tablet, then you can pinch and zoom and can really get into see a lot of detail within the book. And in addition to the audio recordings that we had for the Michif, the Métis Nation content, we've also included biographies of the authors, and many of these include audio greetings in their ancestral languages. And as well, we included the biographies of the translators and language keepers in the book, and this was a way to acknowledge the presence and the really important role that they played in creating the book as it is. And I'll hand it over to Tom again to play Angela Code's greeting.
Whatsie, Angela Code Husie, Saisi Dena Hesley, Tessa Uli Toya Hotsi, Whitehorse Yukon Nostad. Hello, my name is Angela Code. I am a member of the Saisi Dena First Nation. I'm originally from Tuduli Lake, Manitoba. I live in Whitehorse, Yukon. Siniasi. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I don't want to take up any more time because I want to hand it over to Delia, who's going to be speaking about some of the considerations we've been looking at in terms of a loan program and sharing the ebook with as many communities as we possibly can. So Delia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Beth. Tanshi Kiowao, Delia Sharchan, Dishna Kashon, and Michifnia, Nemiatem Mawapamitek. Hi, how is everyone this morning? My name is Delia Chartrand. I'm from the Métis Nation, and I'm happy to see everyone here today. I'm coming to you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, as Beth mentioned, and I would like to acknowledge that I'm on the First Nations Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So Beth spoke about the process and the development of the book and highlighted many of the diverse features of the content. Now I'll briefly speak to where we are at currently with sharing the book and the vast considerations that have gone into how best to distribute it. So with a project like this, ideally we would like to develop some sort of program where we're able to purchase devices, load them with the ebook, and send them out to communities. With limited resources as to how many devices we can initially purchase, the proposal of operating a program like this has led us to explore a number of perspectives as to how best to allocate resources and to equitably distribute devices. How do we get it into the hands of schools and youth, and how do we prioritize so that our book has the furthest reach and impact? These are all questions we need to look at. So we know what we want, that we want our book to reach audiences which might not otherwise have the opportunity to access it. So the idea of lending to communities without stable internet connection became a significant consideration within those discussions. Additionally, as the book is meant to be a language resource and translated into multiple Indigenous languages, one proposed avenue is that we prioritize speech communities with existing language revitalization infrastructure that's already in place, where the book can be used as a learning tool to support those language learning efforts. One possibility of this is that we consider sending copies to the communities recommended, is to send it to the communities where contributing translators are from, so that the languages and dialects represented in the book's translation texts are aligned with the communities we're sending them to. Ideally, whatever model for an ebook loan program we do develop, we'll look at how best to allocate devices in a way that's both geographically diverse, but also culturally diverse and captures First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation communities evenly. So consequently, as our own resources are limited in employing a distribution program, we also need to consider how to benefit from existing infrastructures that are already present in places like schools, libraries, cultural centers, and language programs in order to use those platforms to share this resource. So these discussions are currently ongoing and they're in development towards this goal of an ebook loan program. And I just had one final note to share, that the information on how to access a copy of the ebook is located on the bottom slide of the PowerPoint that was shared. I'll turn it back over to who's next.
Thank you. And our last presenter will be Carl Seward.
Thank you very much. Let me get to the proper screen here for me to share. I won't be sharing slides today. I'll be sharing some websites, but I will be posting the website addresses in the chat when I'm finished speaking. As with many of our other speakers today, I will begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which I am sitting. The University of Central Oklahoma recognizes that we gather on land entrusted to the care and protection of the Caddo and Wichita peoples. These lands are part of the wider state of Oklahoma, which is shared by the 39 sovereign indigenous nations, including the Kiowa, Comanche, Osage, Apache, and Fort Sill Apache nations, and is associated with the forced relocation of nations through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So I'm here today to speak a little bit about land acknowledgements. And in order to do that, I need to address a little bit about who I am. My name is Carl Seward. My pronouns are they, them, or as presenting. And I am a white European American of German ancestry. And so the immediate question that might occur to everyone is, what business do I have speaking about any of this? Okay. And to answer that question, I first learned of land acknowledgements in, I believe, 2019, when I was preparing to speak at the Oklahoma ACRL conference. And I chose to use a land acknowledgement myself at the beginning of my presentation. But I also feel very strongly that living in Oklahoma, a state that calls itself Native America, a state that used to be Indian territory, and a state where our largest university uses a fight song whose two main words are two different synonyms for the word thief. I feel that using land acknowledgements is incredibly important in this state. And My institution at the time was not using land acknowledgements at all, and so I felt compelled to step up and begin using them myself for my own personal purposes. So as I said, I began at an OKCRL conference. I gave a land acknowledgement of the location on which we were. And then once we went into COVID and all things were virtual, I began working with OKCRL as a member of the board to establish a land acknowledgement to be used during virtual conferences and to be shared at the beginning of all events. I also was at the time a board member for NWILL, and I was instrumental in asking NWILL to create a land acknowledgement and putting it together with the assistance of other members of the board. So my purpose here today is both to make certain that everyone understands the significance and importance of land acknowledgements, but also to talk a little bit about how to go about creating a land acknowledgement if you are not currently doing so. And the starting place for many people is a website called nativeland.ca or Native Land Digital, which provides a world map which allows us to zoom in and view an area where we currently are and get information about who the rightful keepers of that land are, and give us a starting point for information gathering in order to compose these land acknowledgements. So if you are wanting to create a land acknowledgement, if you're wanting to put one together for your organization or just for yourself for a presentation that you happen to be giving, what are some steps that you should take? The first thing you need to do is determine your purpose. Why are you doing this? Why do you feel that it's important to establish this practice? And I encourage you to give this some very careful thought, because there has been over the past few years an increase in focus on initiatives for diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on, some of which are not as sincerely felt as they might be. And so consider for yourself whether this is something that you are doing to simply check a box, to perform a level of sensitivity or quote unquote wokeness, or whether your purpose is truly to share information that you feel is important. So consider carefully why you're doing what you're doing. And then as librarians, of course, our next step is always and should always be research. Nativeland.ca is a good starting point. Where you go, if you click on a space, you will get a listing of the places of the nations which include information about your area. When you click on one of those nations, you will get a page that lists additional information about them, including links to the nation's website, source images and maps which have been used to determine why that nation appears in that particular location, and so on. These sources, like any sources, should be followed up on and verified, but this is a great beginning point to do your research and find out what you can do to begin putting these land acknowledgements together. So then when it comes to the work of writing, obviously you want to focus on being respectful, focus on providing information to your listeners that they might not be aware of, and framing it in a way that is both sensitive and honest. So some of the things that I would specifically mention are to avoid what's often called the plight narrative. There is an idea among non-native peoples in North America that Native American people, tribal people, existed a long time ago. They existed before European colonization. Colonization happened, and the Indians were wiped out or destroyed, or other terrible things happened to them, which certainly are historical facts. But then the story often ends there and does not continue to address First Nations and Native people as existing in the present and in the future. So it's important to retain those ideas as well. Be direct and honest about what you say when you talk about historical events, but be aware that Native people will be listening, and consider whether you might be re-traumatizing individuals or harming them in additional ways through the words that you're using. Whenever possible, use the indigenous names for nations, and work as hard as you can on pronouncing them correctly. Pronunciation can be difficult, but if you can pronounce Tchaikovsky, you can probably pronounce Kikaboy, for example. And many tribal websites will include pronunciation guides, which will actually allow you to listen to native speakers pronouncing names, practice them. And then, in addition to doing your own research, I highly recommend contacting the nations in question, asking them what their policy is on land acknowledgements, asking them if they have wording or verbiage that they prefer to be used for land acknowledgements, asking if they indeed want them to be used at all. There are some nations who prefer that land acknowledgements not be provided by anyone other than a member of the nation, which is perfectly reasonable, and those requests should be honored. And consider asking if a nation provides the opportunity to for one of the members of the nation to read your acknowledgement and provide feedback and recommendations. Do take advantage of that, but respond by paying them, providing them with reimbursement for their time, either directly or through donations to the nation or to other organizations that support the nations and their missions. The free labor is not an acceptable thing to be requesting. Once the acknowledgement has been created, use it often, but don't let it become routine. Make certain that you are speaking the words in a respectful manner and using the acknowledgement thoughtfully whenever it's being used, and make certain that the document is living. Take criticism, take feedback, take suggestions and recommendations, take them seriously, and respond to them in a reasonable, respectful, and prompt manner. And as always, when dealing with any group that feels that they have been harmed by your actions, remember that impact is greater than intent. Your reasons for doing what you're doing are nothing like as important as the impact that you have on the people who are hearing you. And if you are causing harm, you need to take that into account and take that harm seriously. And finally, don't just stop with the land acknowledgement. Take additional action beyond creating and using a land acknowledgement. Review your impact on the Native nations around you. Review the history of your institution and the impact that it has had on the nations around it. Learn what nations are needing and wanting and asking for, and do whatever you can to support those needs to the best of your ability. And the final link that I will be sharing in the chat is to a list of resources that I've put together over time. Many of these are specific to Oklahoma or to the Portland area because of the land acknowledgements that I have written in the past. But there are other sources that are included here as well. And then you'll notice that sheet 2 is essentially an outline for what I've already provided to you today. So again, I will share all of those in the chat here in a moment, and I will stop sharing and turn things back over so that we can answer some questions.
Thank you. We have finished our scheduled time. If panelists are available to stay a little bit longer for questions, we'd appreciate that. But if you have other commitments, please, you are quite welcome to leave. Thank you. Wonderful. The first question we have, does anyone know how many tribal libraries there are in the US? I just think it would be a good statistic to note. Also, who are your patrons primarily? And I believe that was sent in during Marida's part of the panel.
I don't have the exact number of how many tribes there are in the U.S., but our patronage is mainly the tribal community. But we are a public library, so anybody who wants to stop by and get a library card can.
Wonderful. Is there a way to donate to tribal libraries outside of the government?
Our tribal library has like a deed of gift, and then it's just you know, just the understanding that maybe we won't add all of the titles to our collection. You know, maybe they'll just be like put on the free table for community members to take, because it's all based on like the condition and if we need the title for our library. But yeah, usually they can just come directly, contact the libraries directly, and they can tell you if they need any donations or not.
Some of our some of the Finnick libraries have got foundations to make financial contributions to as well. And I know Manisha, if you want to chime in, because you've done a lot of a lot of organizing physical material donations, haven't you, over time? Well, yeah, anyway,
Okay.
I think tribal libraries are always happy to receive money in particular.
And I will also like to mention that in my in that Google Doc handout, there are several items that are categorized as advocacy, which are organizations that do support tribal libraries, support other tribal needs, and those are great places to donate as well.
Thank you. Is there a way to, no. There was a question about what do your collections look like? For example, is it only Indigenous books and materials, or is it everything?
Yes, everything. But there are some libraries that are maybe focused more on research, so they might have more of like different tribal titles. But because we are a public library and you know, our community tribal members, you know, they're not all looking for research items. They're also looking for, you know, things that are mainstream in our children's, young adult, general collection. So, but then we have a collection of Native American titles, and also our reference section. A lot of them are Native American, and then ours are specific to Yakama Nation.
Do any panelists' libraries have policies and procedures set up to work with culturally sensitive sources? Info that may be used by a specific group, but not necessarily normally allowed to be shared with people outside of the group. In Hawaii and the Pacific, there are some types of information that are not supposed to be shared outside of a family or area group.
Yes, there are things that are culturally sensitive and maybe only available to tribal members. And so a lot of that is just from experience from maybe like tribal artwork being exploited, or different types of things like that being exploited. So that's why there are those protections and parameters, but each tribe is unique, so it's not like the standards across the board.
I
I
know
don't
that
wanna put-
there's, go ahead.
Oh, so sorry. I don't want to put Dealey on the spot. But like in her role as the managing and coordinating the We Are Here Sharing Stories mass digitization initiative, I know I was involved in the first part of that initiative. That was from 2018 to 2021, and we were at that time with the first group. We were setting up, those considerations when the team is going through material that might be culturally sensitive, or should not be shared. And we had 3 Indigenous researcher archivists that were sort of the first set of eyes, and then we could consult with the Indigenous advisory team and the Indigenous advisory circle at LAC. But Dealey, have you continued or further developed that with the new We Are Here team?
So with respect to sharing records, because we're a federal institution, we carry both government records and private records. The new iteration of this digitization project, which Beth was alluding to, we're looking at not only digitizing open records, which can be on the public sphere, but also digitizing restricted records, and then looking at what we can do in terms of providing that type of specific meaningful access to Indigenous communities. That I think the question was really getting at the heart of, as a lot of our records are bound by our access and privacy legislation in Canada, so ATIP. What we're doing is digitizing. What our plan is, and because we have just started up in the last couple months, and we've got a new team onboarded, and we're all Indigenous staff on the new team now. What we've started doing is proactively digitizing restricted records with the hopes that we can provide access and through other avenues with respect to that kind of more targeted access to Indigenous materials for Indigenous communities. We do have some examples of that are already employed through different memorandums of understanding and partnerships that our institution has with other Indigenous governments or institutions. For example, we have an agreement with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation that was put in place between Library and Archives Canada and the NCTR, so that we were able to share residential school records with them, with the understanding that they have their own privacy legislation that's very similar to ATIP, and they provide access to Indigenous communities and patrons through that mechanism. So there's already some kind of basic infrastructure set up, different partnerships, but we are continuing to explore those options and those opportunities to get access to more communities where the records are going to have the most impact and be most important to for the duration of the next 2 years, which we're scheduled to be running our digitization project. So I hope that covered a little bit of it.
So I just wanted to mention that I attended a panel of tribal librarians at a past Oklahoma Library Association conference. And one of the speakers, unfortunately, I can't remember the nation that they came from, but their tribal leadership has a prohibition on written records for certain types of historical information based on their experience with treaties and the reliability of written information versus orally presented information. And so they had a unique situation there in that they needed to collect historical information, but they were doing so through audio recordings and through things like that, because nothing could be written down. So there's no one answer to the question of what is culturally problematic, what is something that should be paid attention to. It really does vary widely by the nation, their experience, and their policies.
Well, thank you everyone on the panel for participating, and thank you so much for staying a bit longer to answer these questions. If we find more in Huvo, we'll see if we can pass them along to get answers. Thank you so much. Also in chat, there was a hello from the Lummi Nation Northwest Indian College Library, and lots of thanks for sharing all of this. So thank you. And I believe that will conclude the panel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.